How did you get started in art and music?
I was about 3.5 years old, 4 years old, and my mom noticed that when she would give us dessert pudding in a bowl, my brothers and sisters would all be gone from the table, and I would still be there for 30 to 45 minutes just drawing in my bowl with my spoon, trees, just simple things. And at 4 years old, my mom realized that I was going to be an artist for the rest of my life, so she got me started at a young age doing paint by numbers, starting right around 4 years old. and that was the beginning. My childhood in Rockville, Maryland, and Richmond was very good. All my brothers and sisters got along. It was a good time.
Your painting style was created by frosting cakes?
Yeah. As an adult, I started doing 4-inch spatula palette knife style on a large scale with acrylics. But when I was about 5 years old, my mom started me off in the kitchen. She would bake cakes and let me frost them. And that was my first zen artistically. And I guess there were no rules about frosting cakes. So as I got older, the palette knife style was actually just painting on a large scale with bright colors, the same patterns I did when I was frosting a cake at 5 years old.
Your father disapproved of you artistically.
Yeah, my mom really wanted to push me to be an artist, to take classes in architecture and everything you could possibly do. But my father forbid me to do art because he saw it as useless, and music. He was a musician, but he did not want to see me waste my life on being an artist or a musician at all. He disapproved of everything I did all my life. It was tragic, but that's just the way it was with my father.
In 1972, you moved from Rockville to Baltimore, Maryland at the age of 8.
A boy by the name of Vincent helped us move in. He was very nice. We were moved in within a week. The kid, Jane and Lee were young. They're about 1 year old. There are 6 kids total. And the house originally, I believe, was for $75,000, and my mom offered them $23,000 cash, and we bought it. It was 5 acres with a haunted house. We didn't know it was haunted, but my oldest sister was clairvoyant, and she could see what was going on in the house. I felt it. The living room doors were always closed, and my mom would ask me to get peas out of the freezer in the living room. So you go through the doors. It's 20 degrees colder in there. That's where the piano was. That's where I played piano. And you could feel, it was always so cold in there. And I'd run in there, grab the peas, slam the door, and run out. It was scary, actually. My sister told me recently in a discussion, she had visited me here in Las Vegas, and she told me of a time when she was a teenager. She was walking down the property from the hill, and she heard this clawing, like claws on wood. And it got louder and louder and louder, and finally she went to the source, and she went up into the ladder, up into the attic of the closet. It was on the side of the house. I never went in there. And she opened the door, and there's claw marks on the door, and there was a little, like a little square wooden box, a hand-carved wooden box that was possessed by a demon spirit. She never told anyone about this until about 6-8 months ago. And she kept it with her for 20 some odd years. And all I can think is that it kept giving her bad luck, but she got rid of it. And then her life got much better. But yeah, she could feel the spirits there. She was very clairvoyant. After the second week, the whole family was in the family room, and there was a 2-seat sofa I was sitting on. And Vincent came in, and he sat down next to me and put a pillow in between our laps. And he reached down in my pants and started playing with my dick. I was 8 years old. He was 11. It had ended up that he had been molested by a pedophile when he was very young in the neighborhood. And he was a gay necrophiliac at the age of 11 years old. He likes having sex with dead bodies. So our family, we weren't allowed to have any kind of sugar whatsoever. No candy, no chips, no soda, nothing like that at all. We had an organic garden that we had out of. We had 5 apple trees, asparagus, just every kind of vegetable for a salad. And that's what we ate. We ate some kind of meat or chicken or something like that. So Vincent leaned over to me and whispered in my ear, I'm going to teach you a game. It's fun. It's called Mummy. And so as time progressed, he slowly manipulated me to having gay sex with him at 8 years old. We would go down to his basement. No one would be home. And he'd have like a Snickers bar or some soda or something and get me down there. He would take off my clothes and lay me face up on the concrete. Sometimes it'd be winter, it'd be cold. And he would say, lay there dead like a mummy. This is the game. And then he would take off his clothes. He would hump me face to face for 5, 6 minutes. Then he would orgasm. And I never orgasmed. It was a feeling. It was sex. But once again, I was 8 years old. I didn't even know what sex was. I had a girlfriend, Julie, for 4 years. And I never told anyone, never talked to her about it. I was unaware. So Vincent had sex with me 1, 2, 3 times a week for 4 years. And it wasn't until I left Baltimore to live in Virginia Beach that I realized, as a teenager, oh my God, I was sexually molested.
Tell me the story of the photo of Jesus.
When I was 9 years old, living in Baltimore, I didn't want to go to church. I didn't like going to church because the perfumes used to make me, I'd be gagging for air. I can't be around smells like that. So my father kind of thought I was possessed as a little kid. So that day, I skipped going to church. I put the Bible on my chest with my little gray suit on and my little red bow tie. I was 9 years old. And the family left without me not even knowing that I wasn't in the car. When they got back from church, my dad yelled up at the staircase, because I lived upstairs in my brother's room. We shared a room, as always. He said, Kirby! And so he came in the room and he ripped my suit right off my body and just beat the living crap out of me. He beat me so bad. And when he was leaving, he was punching me, just a grown man beating up on a 9-year-old boy, defenseless. So when he was leaving, I'll never forget this. I will never believe in Jesus Christ unless you can show me a photograph of Jesus Christ, and it better say printed on Kodak paper on the back. Well, fast forward, 1982, when my parents got a divorce, I was working at a grocery store with Mary Adams. She said, Kirby, there's a girl that's going to bring in a picture that you have to see. We lived in an all-military zone, all military. In Virginia Beach, Chesapeake, Portsmouth, Newport News, Oceana. It was all military. So the girl's father was a photographer. He would go in jets at high speeds and just take pictures of what's going on up there. Speed of sound, whatever they're doing. And so she brought in a manila folder, came up to me and Mary. We went down an aisle. She handed me the 8x10 black and white picture. And on the left lower hand corner, you could see the inside of the jet, the dials. And then on the right hand side of the picture, just outside the lens of the window, was Jesus Christ. An image of Jesus Christ in a ghost-like form. And he was wearing a robe and a pure white rope belt. It was the whitest thing in the image. And then you could see his head and his long hair. He had his hands outreached. You couldn't see his feet. And I looked at the picture for about 2-3 minutes, and I turned it over, and it said printed on Kodak paper on the back. And I told myself, that I had been redeemed and that my prayers have been answered. I gave the image back to the girl and I said, thank you. And then I never saw the girl ever again. It was a top secret file that she had taken off her father's desk. But I just think it's God's way of saying, you asked for a picture, I'm going to give you one. And he did.
And in 1976, you moved to Virginia Beach.
Yeah, my father had quit IBM after 17 years, and he wanted to do something different, so we moved to Virginia Beach from Baltimore in 1976. And we all lived at the KOA campground that him and my mom managed. We lived in Airstreams for the summer, but then my mom and dad got a house up in 71st Street in the north end of the beach. There was no one there, no one in the wintertime. It's pretty much just a vacation spot for tourists in the summertime. But so I didn't have a friend for an entire year. There are no buses, and we were one house away from the ocean on 71st Street. So I would kick my soccer ball from 71st Street to the 16th Street Pier, which is 5 miles there, 5 miles back, 10 miles total. And that's what I did with my time. I would get day-old bread from my mom and go down to the beach and feed the seagulls. Just break the bread off, throw it up in the air, and next thing you know, there's a couple hundred seagulls, eating bread off you. It was fun. But I would walk the beach alone many days, and that was pretty much what I did for the first year. Then we moved inland to Bay Cliff, about 26 miles away from the ocean, and right around 1982 I went to community college and studied computer-aided drafting for architecture. But prior to that, in high school, from 10th grade to 12th grade, I studied architecture. I could draw a house from the ground up. It took about a month to do that, and my teacher was Mr. Miller, and when I was about 19, we actually built his house that he designed. I was working in construction. Okay, at 18 years old, I took my friend Charles Miller. He was a bass player. We went to his first rehearsal with a band he was in called Bad Attitudes. And that was a punk rock band. I had gotten into punk rock at my first job at 14 years old with Joe McNaughton. He turned me on to it. And then my friend Rich Chinook came in, and the scene grew really quick back in 1979, 1980, I think is what it was. And all our friends were punk rockers, and we all became musicians because we were so into the style of the music and the energy. But I knew after taking Charles to his first practice, the energy in that room was nothing like I'd ever experienced in my life, and I knew at that point that I wanted to do music for the rest of my life. I had been practicing with Death Row in the summertime with no air conditioning in the garage. I was a skateboarder. I had a half pipe in my backyard, but right around the block from this rehearsal practice room in the garage was a ramp. It was hot. I was dehydrated, didn't really know it, but I went to the ramp and I was at the very top, about 13 feet, 14 feet in the air, and my friends said that I was just standing on the edge of the ramp at the very top and just fell forward. I passed out and hit my head at the very bottom of the ramp. We weren't wearing pads back then. It was just shoes, bare knees, no elbow pads, no helmets. And I got knocked unconscious. And I had about 6 visions. And the first vision I had, you black out. And then the first vision I had was that night. I was singing for Death Row at a party in Allenton, which is where the ramp was. And I remember waking up for just a split second, and my brother found me. He was at the party. He had been knocked out. He had been knocked unconscious by my dad years ago, so he knew what it was like to be knocked unconscious. And he recognized that I had been knocked unconscious. So he grabbed me with his friend, and we went to the hospital. They asked me if I had any weed on me, and I had a bag of indicas, the first bag of weed I ever bought. at 18 years old. Totally illegal, but I never even smoked it, but I gave him the weed. So I went to the hospital and woke up about 2 days later from being unconscious. And right next to me was my dad crying. He didn't think I was going to ever wake up because it was a pretty bad concussion. But it was sad. In 1989, I was 26 years old. I had been working in a restaurant for 2 years, for 7 days a week. And I was watching CNN, and they said, if you want to make it as an artist or a musician in this world, you either have to go to LA or New York. And we had been to New York and it was okay. It was just, we wanted something different. So me and Mark and Nadia got in a van, threw all our stuff in it, and moved to LA. Ended up in Hollywood. And it just so happens that my first book I ever read, this girl, Christy, gave me, is Jonathan Livingston Seagull. And I read it just before we moved across the country. That was the first book I ever read. I was 26 years old. Most of my life, I had just been studying National Geographics and not reading them. I never read a book in school, never even cracked open a single book whatsoever, unless it was math. I figured if you were taught in class what needs to be learned, then that's where I got my knowledge from. But I got most of my knowledge from National Geographic starting at right around 4 or 5 years old. As soon as I could open them and look at the pictures, that's when I started my education. But Jonathan Livingston Seagull, the story of his life, is how I based my career as an artist. To fly as high as I can and be as free as I can. And that was the first book I read. And then I read the other book that author had written, another phenomenal book. But yeah, I was never a book reader. I didn't have time for it. I was either working or playing soccer or baseball or doing art.
And in 1989, you moved to Hollywood. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
I had a long journey from Virginia Beach, Virginia on the East Coast all the way to the West Coast. It took us 5 days, I think, in a U-Haul. And when I got to Hollywood, it was gorgeous. We lived right off of Beechwood, right underneath the Hollywood sign. And I was with Mark Wells and Nadia Salmons. And I had a hard time trying to find a job for almost 4 weeks. I was running out of money. I was getting desperate. No one wanted me because I was from out of town. And finally, Mark went to Laurel Canyon to the country store, and underneath the country store was Ed Ledoux's restaurant called Coyote. So Mark went there, and he didn't want the job. He wanted something else. So that night, Mark came home and told me about it. So next day, I went and applied with Ed Ledoux. And I told him, hey, I could do anything. I'll do dishes. I don't care. I've been doing restaurants almost all my life. So Ed hired me in the saute position under Norman Chang from Spago's. That's where Ed was from too, Spago's. He had earned enough money to open up his own restaurant. In Coyote, there were no paintings on the walls. It was just brick walls. So I told Ed, I'm doing these 54 by 54 inch paintings with a 4-inch spatula. And he let me hang 5 paintings in there. And of course, every night there was famous people and they were interested in buying, but at the time, I just wanted everyone to see them. I didn't really care about selling. I was making pretty good money at Coyote. I lived at the top of Laurel Canyon with Ed Ledoux. I lived in the basement and he only charged me $400 a month rent. It was perfect for painting, music, everything. I'd started a band called Dumpster with some friends from Virginia Beach and got them all jobs out in Hollywood, but that fell through. I wanted to do more art instead of music at the time. But yeah, so I got some offers on those paintings. They were pretty big. They were pretty. One was like Jackson Pollock, and then the other 4 were, 3 of them were 4-inch spatula knife acrylic paintings. And the last one was what I call a dump. At the very top of our house, it was flat. So I bricked down a 54 by 54 canvas and just dumped urethanes, smelly old paint and let it harden. And I put that one in there. It smelled so bad that it reeked out the whole restaurant that night, and no one could sit near it. So the table next to that painting sat empty. So I had to pull that out of there. Liv Tyler was the cashier at Coyote, and she was 10 feet from me every day. And I knew she was a photographer. Back then, I looked more like a model. I had long hair, was much more chiseled. I weighed about 150 pounds, solid muscle, six-pack. And she had a studio, private studio, that she did photography in. And she had a fashion designer, clothes designer, makeup designer, hair designer, lighting designer, backdrop designer. So it was a production. So I did photography. I modeled for her for about 6 or 7 sessions, and it was a lot of fun. I mean, we shaved my eyebrows, spiked my hair out, dyed it black, just makeup. Since they knew all my measurements, it was easy, and it was just a blast. But yeah, Liv was a great girl. After I got attention from having the paintings at Coyote, a customer came in and said, hey, I'm a member of the LA Art Association. It's a 500 member group. We'd like you to join. So I submitted 3 large pieces, and they loved all of them. The thing is every month it was kind of themed. It was off of La Cienega, and it was a professional gallery, but they would submit 50 pieces from the 500 member crew. And for 5 months straight, I showed 3 pieces every month. And I was making waves. They liked my art. I liked my art. I enjoyed what I was doing. I was very dedicated. The art was good. It was the main thing I was doing at that time was 4-inch spatula with really thick acrylics. I was spending, you could get 54 by 54s for $35 on sale. But then I would put about $300 or $400 worth of paint onto them. And they were thick and they were beautiful. And I really enjoyed that period. I got tired of working at Coyote. It wasn't necessarily the pressure. I wasn't under a lot of pressure or stress. I just wanted a change of pace. So I answered an ad in the paper, and ended up being Michael Jackson's chef, Monty Nile. And he was opening up a all-natural coffee house bakery with all natural ingredients, and he needed a designer, a pastry designer. In the beginning, I just started off as a delivery driver. I showed him how to make crusts and how to really formulate the process of designing, high-end gourmet pastry. We landed a 29 grocery store chain called Trader Joe's, as you now know what they are. Overnight, we had to go from 9 accounts to over 35, 40 accounts. And at that point, I was only sleeping maybe 1 day out of 4 days. I was working 3-4 days in a row without sleep. And I had my first nervous breakdown. I was driving my car on Melrose and just pulled over to the side and parked. It felt like God was talking to me. I'm not Jesus Christ. It's just, and I know what hearing voices is like. I wasn't hearing voices. It's just this high euphoric feeling that I needed to take my clothes off down to my underwear and start walking. And so for 3 days, I walked around LA with long hair, cut, and in my underwear. And finally, after 3 days, my friends were frantic. They didn't know where I went. And so friends of mine went out into Los Angeles, just spreading out, and they found me downtown in my underwear. And they took me to the hospital. And right when I got to the hospital, I kind of freaked out because I thought they were trying to kill me for some weird reason. They strapped me down and shot me up with Thorazine, and I woke up 2 days later, strapped down to a bed. And Monty was there, my dad was there, and they didn't know what was going on. So the doctor came in and talked to us, and he said that due to stress and lack of sleep, I had permanent brain damage. and that I would have bipolar for the rest of my life and I might not be able to function in society. That's what he told me. That was 1991. In 1993, I was living in a house. I was actually living in the garage. I used it as a painting studio. I was doing loose canvas, huge 5 feet by 8 feet canvas. It's just flat on the ground. And I had buyers. It was fun. But we had a huge living room, and Nirvana was practicing in there at the time. And so I met Kurt and all the guys. Kurt was the sweetest guy in the world. He was calm, quiet, just he wasn't this radical thing that people make him out to be. He was just the sweetest guy in the world. And he liked one of my paintings that I'd given to Nadia. Nadia had lived there. And he wanted it. It was a beautiful palette knife painting. It was one of the first ones I did was actually a palette knife, a formal French palette knife. And it looked like a reflection on water of just gorgeous colors. It was a 30 by 40 hand stretch, and I'd given Nadia 2 paintings. One was really dark, a red, black, and yellow. The other was that beautiful, and she kept them upstairs in her bedroom. But for some reason, she had taken it downstairs and hung it on the wall where Nirvana was practicing. Kurt fell in love with it, but I told him I can't sell it to him because it's Nadia's. But I guess the hardest thing I had to deal with was Kurt's death, because I had seen other people die, friends from fame, not being able to go out and just suffering and leading to drugs like heroin and things like that. But Kurt's death really hit me hard.
In 1993, you moved to New Orleans. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I had an offer from Dave Ketching. He was actually the pizza delivery driver at Coyote that I met. Really nice guy. And later on down the road, 1993, he had an inheritance and opened up this mansion, the Munster Mansion off of Lion Street, uptown New Orleans. And he asked me to help him cook there. So at the time, I was actually the cook at Dave Grohl's new restaurant called Black Cat, which was also a live theater in DC. So I went down to New Orleans and helped Dave at the Waterfront Cafe. It was a lot of fun. It was a small cafe on the first floor with a nice kitchen, a bar next to that, and then a pool hall next to that. Next to that was kind of like about 150 people you could fit in the room with a live stage. And so the second floor was about 15-foot ceilings, hardwood floors. It was real nice. It was 4 really big bedrooms and a huge room. And there was 2 kitchens, 2 bathrooms. And then the third floor, that was all to myself. It was the entire building, but the third floor, it was all cedar with 2 huge stained glass windows that you could push out for ventilation. I stayed there for 2 years. It was a really good time. Okay, during the time I was in New Orleans, I did 3 gallery shows. At one point, I was working for Louisiana Pizza Kitchen as their pizza brick oven operator, me and this other guy. But they were featuring local artists in the restaurants, and they had 3 restaurants at the time. And I had gotten Patty Elstrad into the one I worked at Carrollton Corner. I was the kitchen manager. And so the first restaurant gallery showing I did was at Caldi's. It's this famous cafe in the quarter, and they just had pictures of coffee beans. And I went up to the owner. I said, look, I do these really big paintings. They're all hand stretched. They're done with palette knife. They're real nice. Won't put any new nails in the walls. I'll just take your paintings down, your pictures down, and I'll put my paintings up. We'll see how it goes. So it was a big hit. I usually sold almost all my art at cost because I just wanted to make my money back, and I wanted to spread the art around when I was younger. At this point, I think this at Caldi's was my 9th gallery showing in 7 years. And I did another gallery showing at Louisiana Pizza Kitchen in the quarter during Mardi Gras. That was really big. And so I sold all that. And then I did a showing at this gallery magazine. It took a year to get in there, but once I did, I had a nude model live, and I did a 30 by 40 hand stretch on a big easel, and so I did an abstract painting of her live, and it was pretty crowded. We had a really good time, but yeah, those were the 3 gallery showings I did. Well, not technically galleries, but 3 showings I did in New Orleans in those 2 years. It was a lot of fun. I miss New Orleans. The architecture was insane. People, the parties. Every day was a reason for a parade, rain or shine. It was just gorgeous. I miss it.
In 1995, you moved to Las Vegas.
Just gotten out of New Orleans. I had a really good time there. I wanted to be closer to my mom in Las Vegas. She had lived here for a few years, and I moved out here with everything I owned in a suitcase. Took a bus, and it was fun. It was hot in the summers, but the hardest thing I had to deal with, there are no galleries. The culture was just artistically, I was still doing art. I was doing palette knife drawing or paintings in my trailer. I had a 30-foot trailer, and worked at the KOA campground in the office, and no one knew that I had bipolar disorder. I had my 6th nervous breakdown at KOA. My doctor said that I needed to stop taking Navain because it was giving me tardive dyskinesia, which is shaky hand movement, and I still have it, but he put me on a drug called risperidol, and risperidol did not work at all. So what happened was I had a nervous breakdown in the middle of the night, and once again I threw everything out of my trailer. Typically in an episode, I get rid of everything man-made, whatever it is, plastic, a cup, underwear, whatever it is. And so my neighbors woke up to everything in my trailer out in the yard. And so they called the manager. He shut everything off in my trailer, make sure everything was off. And they took me away in an ambulance. And I went to 6161 Insane Asylum on Charleston. And the first day I was there, I was tortured for 2 weeks straight. They gave me, I told them in the very beginning that my doctor had given me a risperidol and it didn't work. I wasn't completely insane. I was just like edged. It's the beginning stages of having a breakdown. It's where you have control, but you don't have control of your thoughts and your movements. So I told the director, I said, I've been on Navain. It gave me tardive dyskinesia. They put me on risperidol, and just put me back on Navain, I'll be okay. So the first night, the guy said, take a bath. So I'm in the bathtub, and this football player guy comes in. You know, that's the way all the guards are. They're off-season football players, huge guys. And he grabbed me out of the bathtub and slammed me onto the tile floor. And I hit my head real hard, and I got up, and I said, what did I do wrong? He said, you're taking a bath too long. And so I had 5 prior insane asylums, and I had seen violence, but I knew that if this guy is going to slam me onto the tile floor because I'm taking a bath too long, that I would be in for trouble. So that night, there were no beds, so they put me in the strapped down room, unstrapped. There was no pad, no pillow, just steel. It's a steel gurney is what it was. And the next day, I woke up and I still wasn't getting the proper meds at all, not even close. So each day I got worse and worse. I have mania, which means I don't get depressed, I get the opposite. In bipolar, you can swing either way or both, but I always swing manic, which is high anxiety. And on the 3rd day, it was after dinner, the night crew was on, day crew had already went to bed, and William and Tad were the people. There's a C ward and a D ward. A ward is insured, nonviolent. B ward was insured violent, C ward was uninsured nonviolent, and D ward was uninsured violent. I was in the C ward, which means I was uninsured and nonviolent. So I wasn't a risk to them, but I was swinging very manic. So William was very verbally abusive to everybody. And he really pissed me off. He was just making derogatory comments at me, and I wasn't having it. So him and Tad, we got into not a fist fight. I don't ever do physical. I just do verbal. They didn't like it, so they threw me in the strap down room. At this time, I was just wearing a gown, no underwear, no socks. And they took my gown off. I said, "Can I just go to the bathroom first?" And they're like, "No, you just have to shit and piss yourself." So I was strapped down, wrists and ankles. You can't move at all. And that night, I pissed and shit myself. And William and Tad came in there in the middle of the night, 3 a.m. or so. And William threw on the light and grabbed the shit from my ass and held it over my nose and mouth so I couldn't breathe, and then forced it down my throat. He smeared it all in my eyeballs, up my nose. He did it like 3 times. He made me eat my shit. And then he came around to the head and was kicking me in the head, and I'm screaming frantically. I don't have any defense at all. I'm completely strapped down, immobile, and this guy's torturing me with my own shit. It was terrible. I was screaming, and there's nothing I could do. And so Tad and William mopped up the mess, but I still had shit all over my face. I had a little bit more hair than this, but by morning the shit had all hardened on my face, and the charge nurse came in at about 8 a.m. and told me that Tad and William said I was throwing shit all over the place and that I'm a sick, deranged man. And I told her that's not what happened, and she's like, "I don't care what happened. You need to just take a shower and get over it." And so that was the 3rd day, and this went on. Illegal strap downs. They were using torturous devices that are totally illegal. In Las Vegas, 6161 was ranked 48th statewide in the country as being the worst asylum in the country. And so I got tortured for a total of 2 weeks. And finally, my manager came in. It was around Christmas time, 1998. They wanted to release me before Christmas, is what they do every year. And I wasn't ready to leave because I was still manic, because they still hadn't given me the proper medications. So they released me, and I went back to KOA, and I was still manic. I couldn't function. I needed longer time, but I needed proper care. I told them what happened. They believed me. It was just tragic. In 1999, my dad was feeling bad for me because I was spending all my money on art. I didn't care about eating. I was a workaholic, very unhealthy. For the 10 years that I was manic, from 1991 to 99, in that area, I continued to work full-time, 7 days a week, playing in bands, doing art, nonstop, full mania. And so my dad said, you got to stop. And at the same time, my doctor told me that should I continue to be on the pace that I'm on, being fully manic and working and being in bands and all that, I'd be dead at the age of 45, is what he said. So he said, "You've got to go on disability and stop working." And at that same time, I had a bet with my dad. I said, because we used to sail together, we really enjoyed that. That was the only bond that we had. Just he and I would go out and sail into the night in the Chesapeake Bay. I said, well, I challenge you. If you go from Virginia Beach to Florida and back and just keep the coast in view, then I'll stop spending money on art. I'll stop painting until you die. Okay? In 1999, he got in his boat and sailed all the way to Florida. He said it was the best time of his life. Freedom from his girlfriend is what he called it. And it took him, I think it was like 2 months, a month to get, he went down there, I think it was like a week and a half, 2 weeks to get there. And then he went from pier to pier, marina to marina, met a bunch of people, loved it. He said he had the best time of his life. And then he sailed back. It took about 2 months total. And so he called me up. He said it was the best time he had in his life. And I was really proud of him, actually. So I stopped painting, stopped spending money on art. I did do digital art, but it didn't cost me anything. I did it for 8 years. And I did maybe 100 paintings, but I destroyed them all, except for maybe 10. And I only have a picture of one that still exists, owned by Rob Shooter. And that's actually an interesting painting. It's a picture of a red, black, and yellow that I did, where it's the image. It's called Funeral Pyre. It's an image where a friend of mine takes my body into the deepest forest and burns me in a funeral pyre after I'm dead. And the painting is probably the most emotional painting I've ever done. And that one survived, and only a couple more. Some friends of mine show me some ones that did survive, but you know, I'm used to painting every day. I do hundreds and hundreds of paintings. And so I stopped painting until 2015. He died, and I went out and got 100 6-inch by 6-inch canvases and did them within a couple weeks. And that was very therapeutic, those 15 years. I spent those 15 years at the Catherine Giannakos Park for the Arts as a curator for the art gallery and the recording studio, and lived there with various Las Vegas artists. It had its very special moments. There really weren't that many problems, considering I was there for 16 years, and we were in the paper, pick of the week. We did so many shows, just week after week after week. We started the whole First Friday movement in our backyard. We were doing 1 or 2 First Fridays a week for a couple of years. But it was a chance for me to let everyone in, all artists, musicians. You know, as a young kid growing up, I used to carry around a 2-foot by 3-foot portfolio and show up to galleries and say, hey, you know, I'd like to do a showing. And they're like, well, you have to have slides. They'd always have a reason that you can't show. And I really resented that. For years, I couldn't get into galleries. They thought I was too young. My art was good, but they thought I was too young. But in this instance, at the art park, the Catherine Giannakos Park for the Arts, I decided I wanted to record anyone that wanted to be recorded musically, and show artistically anyone that wanted to show. Everyone got in. And so that was the birthplace of the art scene through Joey Cantor's mother, Catherine Giannakos, who was a muralist in the Rat Pack era. And she lived at the facility and had the store that she had, Alpha Omega bookstore, Bible bookstore. She stopped painting and had the bookstore, I believe, for 23 years. I had never met her. I always wanted to meet her, but she passed away before I could meet her. Then in right around 1996, she started painting again, full tilt. She had been sketching all those years, but in 1996, she had a pure juxtaposition from her 60s paintings, from dark to beautiful, light, angelic paintings. And she did hundreds of them. She just painted every day. Then on her deathbed, they put a easel in her lap so that she could do magic marker drawings of paintings she wanted to do. She was suffering of breast cancer, and that was what eventually was the cause of her death. But she furiously painted, and I'm the curator for her collection, which is the most important collection in the planet that I know of. And her art is super phenomenal. And that was the main reason why I stayed at the art park, was because I was in the presence of a master. And I left the art park around 2016 and got a mobile home. And I've been here for almost 8 years. And it gave me a chance to paint. And but my last gallery showing was in 1999, and I didn't do any showings until now, which is what this video is all about. It's about me coming back to the world as an artist professionally, and I'm gonna go to New York, and whatever happens, happens. It's whoever gets me, and I think it's gonna be a great thing.
What are some of your art styles?
The styles I did are airbrush, a palette knife with a forked spatula, and then a more traditional French palette knife. And I did many years just the French palette knife with oil and acrylic, but eventually my favorite painting ended up being oil. I like the texture, I like the feeling. Here's an example of the paintings that I do. I like really thick textures that computers can't reproduce easily. This painting is an oil painting. It's done with brush on the exterior and then just literally laying the oil down in there. This will take a total of 10 years to dry at this thickness. It's my favorite style. So I started doing collage cutouts of the National Geographics with an X-Acto knife, and people think they look like photoshopped images, but it's just collage with spray mount. And another style I did was doing large 4-foot by 4-foot finger paintings, and that became my favorite style over palette knife and brush, because you always had that tool in between your hand and the paint. But with finger painting, you immersed the feeling of paint into your fingertips, and it created a very unique style for me. You can really see my emotion in my art. The whole fact that I've been molested and tortured and all that crap, for many years I wanted to just paint beautifully, and it was hard to do that because I had such darkness in my soul. I couldn't get it out, but the way I released the tension was either workaholism or actually just painting, and painting oil became my favorite thing to do. In 2006 to 2012, I did digital art where you had to be good at math. It wasn't like what you're doing now with the word programs like Wombo that I'm doing. It was just an old PC, and it has some programs on it, and I once again didn't use Photoshop. I just manipulated the art using digital for those years. And then in 2021, a friend of mine came over to my house after he was shooting his first feature length. I had done a painting for him that was the feature painting about an artist in the movie. And he came by my house to drop off the battery I had loaned him. It's basically a battery that you can use lights for and things like that for 4 or 5 hours on set. But he turned me on to Wombo, which is a word-generated artificial intelligence art style. I started it in June of last year. And that night when he left, I bought the program. It was $20. And I did AI for 30 hours straight. It was like the worst kind of addiction you could have, because it was so easy and it was so fun. Just to type some words up to 200 letters and come up with an image in 10 seconds, 15 seconds. The digital stuff I did in the early 2000s, you get an image within an hour, half an hour, or sometimes a week it would take. But this was instant gratification. I did close to 60,000 images in 6 months, and I threw away about 45,000 because the technology wasn't quite up to date yet. If you typed in hand, it'd have 10, 15 fingers on it, or there'd be what I call digital garbage on the imagery. But I enjoy AI. I had to stop after 6 months. I was doing 40 hours at a time and then sleeping for 5 hours and doing 40, 30 hours at a time, sleeping for 8 hours and then doing 40 hours. And that went on for 6 months. My shoulders, very deep, started hurting, both my shoulders, and I was in pain all day long, so I had to stop doing it. I was just lying in bed doing AI like a crack addict. It was crazy. So I stopped for about 4 months, and the pain, I had to make it go away through exercise. It still hurts. I can lift my arm about that far before it hurts, and that's been a year. I started doing it again for about an hour a day, 2 hours a day, and it was still painful, but it was a labor of love, as they call it. I want to thank everyone for taking their time out of their life to find out a little bit about an artist based out of Las Vegas, artist, musician. And I want to just thank you for all the support I've been given by my brothers and sisters and my friends all these years. I've been painting and making music all my life, and I will continue. And my goal was to retire at 60 and just start doing shows in New York. I'm 59 now, and I'm representing this documentary at 500 galleries in New York. And if I get a bite, I get a bite. Either way, if they want me, they can have me. Appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Your friends are gone, your family's gone. Where would you go? What would you do? Where would you go?